I was an agnostic college student, somewhat of a party girl, and really materialistic, focused on success to some degree in a materialistic way. I just didn't care about spirituality or religion. It just wasn't an interest. I was kind of raised around judgmental, abusive people who called themselves Christians. So I was done with it. And I liked education. That's where I felt at home. Enjoyed college. I was on my way to run the Austin 10K, and I pretty much had a head-on collision. So it was a bad car accident, and I broke my back in 3 places, didn't have health insurance. And as you might imagine, that added some complications because neurosurgeons in a big college town, this is Austin, they are busy. There's a lot of wrecks. And so there's a lot of college students, taking chances. And so I waited 17 hours with internal injuries and was losing feeling in my leg because bone was pressing on the spine. I didn't know if I was going to walk or not. I believed I was going to live, but everything in my mind was seriously concerned about the physical. I just didn't even think about the spiritual. I said one little foxhole prayer, like, oh God, help me, but everything else was, am I going to walk? What's going to happen? Just that kind of concern. I was taken into surgery, and somewhere in the middle of that surgery, my heart stopped and my spirit body left my form. And I cannot tell you how excited I was. I mean, really those first seconds out of body, I was thrilled that I was wrong. I thought we just went into the ground, I was an agnostic. So I thought, oh, whatever, we'd merge with the earth, some kind of, combination of that. But my spirit form had an identity. It was like the real me. I looked at this physical world and I thought, this is more like a play. Like we're just acting. Our souls are what are important. And this is what carries us through. And I got that in the first few moments. And I didn't think it was a dream or a hallucination at all. I popped out somewhere in the middle of the surgery. So they took me into surgery and my back was open. So the first thing I saw, and I remember looking at it, was, oh, it's so bloody. So I have a big incision in my back, and they were taking bone from my hip to put it into my spine. And basically I fractured 3 vertebrae. So they had, in the 90s, they put rods there and then they put hooks above the vertebrae and below it. So we're talking a long incision, and I had internal injuries. So blood was just kind of pouring onto the sheet. And I was looking down at my body and I was kind of grossed out, like, oh, that's a lot of blood. But I'm so glad that I'm not that body. I mean, like there was real disconnection, that I was just certain that the spirit form was more important than that body on the table. I felt excited. I mean, I have to tell you that I just knew that my spirit form was more than this body, and I was wrong about being an agnostic. I just knew that we continue on. And there were 2 9-foot angels behind the surgeons. So these angels were these light beings. I didn't call them angels at first. They were just highly intelligent beings with light that emanated from their eyes, and they spoke telepathically. And I felt as if I was learning things really quickly. So my soul was understanding that I was out of body. They were there to calm me down, to show me that everything was going to be okay. And they were almost playful. They sent this light through the back of the surgeons, and it lit up my whole body. And I remember thinking, oh, those brilliant surgeons think that they're doing such a good job on my back, but they're actually being assisted by these light beings. And I knew that I'd walk and I'd run. And I knew that these angels were somehow a part of the healing, these light beings. I was just amazed that they were there for me. And, people a lot of times don't understand, the concept of angels, but I think that they are there for us when we get a tough diagnosis or when we're going through something incredibly difficult. And I think they help many people transition. That's what I've come to believe now. So in that moment when I'm out of body, before I think the quote near-death experience begins, because my heart hadn't flatlined at that time, they are there, I'm out of body, and then the monitor flatlines. And at that point, I knew I was dead, and I knew that the surgeons were going to have to start doing something. And my back was open, and this would be bloody and gross, so I didn't want to see it. So I left that room, and the spirit body can just go through a wall. So I remember going through my first wall really quickly, and then I'm just out, and then I went through some more walls, and I was standing in this waiting room area, and there was a vending machine, and I saw my stepdad walk and get a candy bar. I don't know why I saw him, and I didn't know why in that moment, But that became the moment that researchers love because it's a verifiable moment outside of form. So that's why National Geographic and Dr. Oz and so many people have taken interest in my story, is I later verified that he did indeed get that candy bar. And at that moment, my mom and dad were certain I died. And I know that parents have a spiritual, physical bond with their kids. And I know that they felt it when I was about to die, because they were both on their knees praying, certain that I had died. And I just saw my stepdad. And then I was out over the night sky in Austin. I left the hospital. And many near-death experiencers have what they call a moment of oneness. And my moment of oneness was just this happiness. Every person that I'd ever met, talked to, I just wanted to say, hey, enjoy your life. Love everything about it. Enjoy it, be good, be happy, and goodbye. I mean, that was basically all my soul wanted to say, because I didn't know, even though the angels said I'd be back and I'd walk and run, my soul was floating above Austin. And I thought, am I coming back? Am I not? What's next? And I transitioned through this portal, kind of a quick tunnel into like the stars behind you, this beautiful galaxy of stars with lots of light. And I just was floating there, and I felt this, I call it the light of God, but it could be ultimate consciousness. It was just divine intelligence that felt so beautiful and healing coming toward me. And it was far away still, but I felt it. And then it projected almost like a hologram, parts of my life into the night sky. So it was almost like I was watching this movie in the night sky, and I saw different parts of my life. Some of these parts of my life were good. Like I was a kid who loved nature and prayed, and God liked those moments. It was like, that's beautiful. I was shown one moment where I needed to change. And this is a moment, I was 22 and I was kind of judgmental. And there were some people who I worked with who I didn't think they were, quote, cool. They were older than me, and they didn't go to my college, and they didn't like the same things I like. So I just didn't have time for them. I didn't talk to them, wasn't interested in them. They actually went home and prayed for me because they felt that I was sad. And when I saw that they actually cared about me and I didn't take the time to like them, I just felt so deeply embarrassed and so deeply ashamed. And then I just saw how beautiful they were inside. And I thought, wow, so many more people are just beautiful inside. And I need to get to know the hearts of people. I need to look into their hearts the way God looks into our hearts. God sees that we're good from the inside. And that was such a huge lesson for me at that time in my life. Just, I knew that I'd come back and care for people at this deeper level. And then the near-death experience kind of continued on. It wasn't as if I was controlling anything, though. It was as if I could fly and I felt this great freedom, but there was this progression. And out of that moment where I was looking at my life, I transitioned into this beautiful green area. And my grandfather was there. He was the only person who was dead. I've interviewed a lot of researchers, and they always say near-death experiencers always connect with someone who is dead. They're not connecting with someone who is alive still. When they meet someone in that afterlife, they have been there a while. And my granddad died when I was 10, and then I was 22 at that time. He looked very young. I didn't recognize him at first because he died of leukemia in his 70s, but in heaven, he looked about 35 and his eyes glowed with health, and he just looked beautiful. And yet he seemed to love me. And I understood that, okay, this is my grandfather, because he brought, of all things, with him this truck. And this is where people kind of go, a truck in heaven? That doesn't make sense. And, you sure this isn't a dream? And I have to say that it isn't. It was his way of saying everything that is lost is regained in heaven, because this truck sat in our front yard and it rusted, and my dad didn't take care of it. And it was ugly, and there in heaven, it was this beautiful truck again. And I decided to be a child. So my soul at that moment decided, oh, if he can be young, then I can be at any age, I'll be a child. And I sat in the back of this truck, and he drove me through this beautiful green grass. And I just felt the deepest peace I'd felt in so long, like just deeply peaceful, and as if I could just rest for 1,000 years. But at some point he looked at me and he said, hey, look up there, there's this, beautiful light. And I knew that that meant God. And suddenly I got really excited. And he said, do you want to continue on? And I said, I do. And my spirit started flying toward that light of God. And I felt different people's prayers, and I could hear every word that they said, and they were trying to pull me back into my body. One aunt had lost a daughter in a car wreck, and she was begging God that I'd not die. And I remember thinking at this point, oh, that's cool, but I'm about to meet God. Like I don't care. I'm ready to move on. Right. I'm ready to meet God. And as I got closer and closer to that energy of God, I'd never felt so good in my life. Like in my human body, I'd never felt totally comfortable. I'd always felt a little insecure or a little bit in pain or a little bit odd, never fully happy. And all I can say is I felt safe, happy, loved, right, loved exactly the way I am, and just bursting with joy. And it seemed like that was the birthright of every person. Like we should feel that good. And it's just a shame that we don't. And I knew it in the presence of God. And of course, I never wanted to come back, because that's the best feeling ever. That love is just so intense. And yet I was stopped. And there was this barrier, this energetic barrier, and I hit it. And I wanted to keep going towards God, because I didn't know, what happens when you get closer and closer. Do you understand more? I did notice that my own energy field had changed. Like that love had somehow changed me. But I hit this barrier. God said, look down. There was this river, and there were many different souls. Some of the souls had light around them, as if they were connected to God. Other souls had a shadow, like darkness around them. And I remember asking, like, what does the shadow mean? And God was like, oh, that's fear. And it blocks them from the light of God. It blocks them, from the light of their knowing. And so it was just love or fear. And that was it. And that seemed really simple. From that point of view, it gets really complicated here. But over there, there's so much at this soul level that makes a lot of sense on a metaphoric level. And so God was like, you're going to go back and you're going to teach. And I understood that this was not spiritual teacher. This was actually teach in schools. And I was upset at that. I was like, no, God, you misunderstand who I am. This girl wanted to not do something traditional that women do. She wanted to do something that was going to bring her money and acclaim in some way, not teaching. And God kind of laughed at that point. And that was the last thing that I had in that realm. And I almost felt like my soul was thrown back into my body, like a softball or something. Like I remember hurling through this darkness, and then I was back in my body.